You've probably heard it before. We should be more like Sweden. Free college, free healthcare, long vacations, a socialist paradise, right? Dead wrong. Because the truth is, Sweden is not socialist. In fact, Sweden got rich because of capitalism and almost went broke trying socialism. Surprising, right? But the real story of the Nordic model is a lesson in freedom, in faith, in responsibility, not in government control. So let me go into that and break it apart. So for decades, essentially, politicians have been pointing out to Scandinavia, right, like your Norway, your Sweden, and your Denmark, as proof that socialism can work. Like, look at Sweden, they say. High taxes, big government, and everyone's happy. Is that correct? If you dig a little deeper into the history, you are going to find a completely different story. You see, in the early 20th century, Sweden was actually one of the freest economies on earth. Low taxes, strong property rights, open trade, and minimal regulation. And that's when it got rich. Not under socialism, but under capitalism with character. Right? It was essentially later on, it was almost in spite of the socialism. In the 1970s, Sweden tried something new. After decades of prosperity, politicians decided that, they could plan equality or equity. They raised taxes to nearly 80%. They expanded welfare and they grew the public sector until it employed half of the nation. By the way, they also produced ABBA as well at the same time. So for a while, it looked sustainable. But then the bills came due. Businesses fled, innovation stalled, inflation soared. Even the founder of IKEA, Ingvar Kamprad, moved his company abroad to escape confiscatory taxes. Right? It was just really punitive. By the early 1990s, Sweden was actually in a crisis. So what did they do? The unthinkable. They cut taxes, they privatized pensions, they deregulated industries. They didn't double down on socialism. They completely walked away from it. It's like, bye-bye, see you later. So what's the Nordic model that people talk about today? Let's go into that a bit more. So it's not socialism. It's actually capitalism with a safety net. Free markets that create wealth first, then redistribute a portion through efficient, transparent systems. They're all about fairness. So Sweden, they've got no national minimum wage. It's negotiated privately. School choice, but also private competition in healthcare. Lower corporate taxes than the US. And some of the strongest property rights in the world. In fact, property rights is one of the most important things for economic growth. That is not Karl Marx. That is markets, right? Sounds similar, but it's very different. The difference is the Swedes still believe in work, in trust, and in responsibility. Their culture expects people to contribute, not to coast. In other words, they didn't abandon capitalism. They moralized it, right? Really advanced. The secret of the Nordic model is not government. It's culture. See, Scandinavia's high trust, low corruption, and essentially a derivative of Judeo-Christian moral roots make their system workable. You remove that cultural capital and the model completely collapses. Now, that moral philosophy can be also based in a more atheistic system too, so not to deny that. But there is that high trust environment, that low corruption environment. It's, in a sense, there's actually quite a lot of unity, right? It's not the differences that separate them, it's a lot of unity, which is kind of going against what the modern trend is, that all our differences. It's actually more unity than anything else. And it works because of that unity, because of the trust, because of the hard work, because they don't want to coast. So if you remove that cultural capital, as I just said, the model collapses. So let's think about the Swedish socialism model. If we try that Swedish socialism in a culture that lacks honesty, lacks work ethic, or lacks social trust, then you don't get Sweden. You get Venezuela. So as economist Assar Lindbeck, a Swede, also said that next to bombing, taxation is the most efficient way of destroying a society. That's a Swede. Even the Nordics know freedom creates wealth. Culture sustains it. Redistribution drains it if it goes too far. We're not saying redistribution is bad. We're saying there are limits to it. The Nordic story teaches us something profound. You can't buy virtue with taxes. You can't legislate generosity, and you can't redistribute purpose. The moral foundation that makes capitalism work, honesty, trust, service, stewardship, has to come from people, not from policy. Sweden works not because it's socialist, but because it carries the remnants of a moral order that values work, trust, and personal duty. Take that away, and even Sweden will fail. So really, the core lesson from Sweden is that freedom and virtue, not equality, sustain prosperity. So, the next time someone says, oh, we should be more like Sweden, maybe tell them this. Sweden is not proof that socialism works. It's proof that capitalism works when people do. Systems don't make societies moral. Moral people make systems work. And again, I'm not into the NRA, not saying that, but it's the tool. It's what you do with the tool. Like a great craftsperson will create some great work. If you give me a paintbrush, right, I'm a terrible artist. I'm never going to be Michelangelo. I'm never even going to be a regular artist, right? So you give the right people the tools. You give Iron Man some metal and he's in a cave in Afghanistan, he'll create the Iron Man suit, right? It's the same with people. Moral people make systems work. And freedom without virtue leads to chaos. So we're not just saying freedom is the blank solution for all of this. You also need virtue. But virtue without freedom leads to tyranny. Capitalism doesn't need fixing. We do.